I wasn't even really sure what to ask you, if I'm gonna be honest, because like I've never had to ask someone for like any legal question, and the only time I've ever talked to
Go,
a lawyer
That's the
is
best thing is
The only-
then you're thinking taking it the perspective of a member, rank
Yeah.
and file member.
yeah. It was weird because like the last time I ever talked to a lawyer when I was like getting
because
charged.
you're going to prison. Yes, I understand.
So it's very different to sit here and ask you questions when it's like regarding work in comparison to like how do I not go to jail? So before I dive into this, so my name's Quentin,
I
and
knew that.
obviously, so I would like to just introduce you as an individual, if you're okay with that. Like
Sure.
who you are, what did you do prior to this, and how did you get into this position that you're in?
Okay. That's a question.
That's the cue.
Okay. I'm Bob Blakely. I started off, I guess, 55 years ago working on the tools as a plumber.
Oh shit.
I got my ticket and I went out into the field. I subsequently got a steam ticket and a gas ticket. And I was working nights at the Imperial Oil expansion, which was then called the Strathcona Refinery. And I was bored during the day because there was nothing to do. So I went back to school and I took things like um, comparative religions and the philosophy of ancient Greek mythology and things like that. And it was interesting. I got elected as president of the union because guys thought they were voting for my dad, who was also Bob Blakely. When they found out they had elected a 24-year-old kid, they were a little tense, but it worked out not too badly. We had a lawyer. The lawyer would come and tell us that we had these brilliant cases and that we had to fight them to the Supreme Court of Canada because it was important for the labor movement. And we were getting crushed. I mean, we didn't just lose, we were getting crushed. So I thought, look, what the hell? I did the LSAT. I applied for law school, and I went to law school at night. I went to law school during the day, rather, and I worked at the trade at night.
So you would probably beg during that time.
Well, weekends when I wasn't drinking, was sleeping.
So I have a few questions, and most of the questions are going to kind of pertain to things that I've experienced in the trade as a scaffolder, or things I've noticed over the years that happen between the union and or CLAC things,
All
right?
right.
So the first question I'd like to jump in is from like a legal standpoint, what's the difference between CLAC and other locals? If CLAC claims to be a union, like what is the separating difference between, say, local 1325, for example, or local 63, which is CLAC? Like
Yeah.
what separates them?
Well, trade union status under the law, a trade union is defined as a group of employees who has as one of its purposes the regulation of relations between employers and employees. That means they bargain. The Christians bargain as well.
Mm-hmm.
The difference is the philosophy of the organizations. Local 1325 or Local 488 or Local 720 are bargaining to try and get the best deal they can for the member. They bargain, and their philosophy is we're going to incrementally make the world better. The Christians have the theory is they are using Christian love as one of the keys to their understanding of labor relations. What that means is they are less likely to be aggressive. In fact, they are less likely to be aggressive, and they have hit upon an organizational pattern, which is we will always give the employer less than what the building trades unions are getting. They organize by being the low cost labor supplier.
So how would that, okay, when you're saying the employer, like that obviously would have a negative effect or impact on the employees. Like, for example, the crafts,
Sure.
right?
As long as they can get a workforce that will work for that wage, the clackers can always undercut, let's call them a building trades, I'd say a legitimate union, but let's call them a building trades union for the sake of argument.
Next question is this is more regarding like probationary periods. So I wasn't able to find anything, for example, once again, because my local is 1325. But on a quick search, we don't really have anything that is labeled as a probationary period. But with CLAC, you have probationary periods, and that will vary, from my experience, from contract to contract or region to region. There was times where they had a 14-day probationary period up at Fort Hills when PCL was the prime contractor when it was being built. So during that time, in your first 14 days, like that, they could get rid of you. No ifs, ands, or buts, no questions, you were gone. And they can still do that to this day under your 90-day probationary period. But I've noticed in like a handful of their agreements, they always kind of talk about there should be a means to have corrective measures or a way to educate you or use that as a learning experience rather than just turfing you.
Sure, it's called progressive discipline
Hmm.
in some agreements.
So I've noticed with the union, they follow that and they respect that, but with CLAC, they don't even necessarily will give you like a write up or a conversation. It's just, nope, you're gone. Bye. So is there, how do they get around that then?
Probationary periods are legal in Alberta under the Employment Standards Code.
Okay.
Theoretically, a probationary employee has no rights to grieve or to question the decisions of management. If you looked at the 1325 agreement or any of the other building trades agreement, we send them a competent worker. The employer has a right on hire to determine if that person is qualified. And if they don't accept them, we have a right to grieve. We've never had probationary periods in our agreements because we're taking people who have the requisite skills and deploying them. You know, if you've worked for the carpenters for the last 20 years and worked on the tools, chances are you know what you're doing.
Hmm.
Um, the purpose of having the probationary period is twofold at least here. One is you can lay somebody off without having to do anything. And assuming that they may have any rights, those rights are washed out. And the second is it gives the employer power over the workforce. People know they can be gone just like that, and they act accordingly, right? They will not stand up and say, "Wait a minute, shouldn't this be overtime?" So it's to shut people up.
So on the flip side of that, you're talking about there's a handful of people who've been in the industry or that trade, whatever it may be, for X amount of years or time. But what about the people who are new and that still follow or still fall, sorry, under
Well,
the probationary period? Like
sure,
they're,
people who are new
mm,
will send out an apprentice.
yeah.
Chances are the education people in the various union halls will have brought that person in. They will have interviewed them. If they have a an entrance exam, the person has taken the entrance exam. They make sure that they have the necessary educational qualification to qualify for an apprenticeship. You send somebody out, and the apprentice is in exactly the same position as any other employee. So they have a right to grieve. To be honest, you don't need a probationary period to determine if somebody's a scaffolder or a pipe fitter. You know, if you're an experienced foreman or general foreman, you know if that guy is one in the first 20 minutes, right?
Yeah.
And it's the same with apprentices. They're there as learners. When they're a first year, your basic assumption is this kid knows jack squat about anything. And you are supposed to start doing the 80% of apprenticeship that's on the job, and you teach the person how to use a hammer, how not to get something, dropped on his head, how to interpret a drawing.
Hmm.
You're giving that person baseline skills, and that's how the trade grows.
So going back to like the 90-day period, like when did that even get implemented? Has that always been a thing here in Alberta, or was that introduced at some point?
In construction, we never had probationary periods. I shouldn't say never. There may be the occasional agreement that has a probationary period, but generally speaking, we haven't done that. Probationary periods are in a lot of semi-skilled plants, like over at Saputo here across the street, the cheese making factory or whatever.
Hmm.
A lot of industrial agreements will have a probationary period, because the assumption is someone's coming off the street. We need to see what they can do. The reason, this is my view anyway, the reason that the Christians have a 90-day probationary period is it gives the employer power over those people.
So if we're talking like it gives them power over the people regarding CLAC versus like a union, right? If that's the implementation or the use of the 90-day or the probationary period with CLAC, why or what makes us different if we're not implementing that or using that against people? Is that just to like make it fair across the board and not hold people's jobs over their heads and realize like you're a member, we're all members, equal playing grounds, and it's like a respect thing between us and our superiors and everyone that goes down the ladder?
I think that is the case. I honestly think that most of our employers understand that they're either getting a trained person or they're getting someone whose obligation it is for them to train. They understand that, and I think there is a respect component to all of that. I think Alberta employers, especially in the trades, like if you look at people who have done their training here, they can work anywhere in the world on their ticket.
Mm-hmm.
Our trades are respected across the board. The Christians do training. They try to do some of that stuff as well, but that isn't their main focus. Their main focus and their ability to compete in the marketplace is done on the basis of the wage rate, not on the basis of skills. Think about this one.
Yeah.
When you're working for scaffold contractor or a mechanical contractor or a commercial contractor, the more skilled the contractor is, the better you work for them.
Mm-hmm.
You get more productivity from an employer who arranges to have the equipment, the drawings, the specifications, the materials, the equipment that you need to put it up, to have it all mobilized and ready to go. You can get a lot more done than you can by somebody, realizing, gee, we've got all this material. Now, just like, where did I put those blueprints? The skilled contractor wants you to be able to get on the work and do it. It is costing him money if you are standing around. A less skilled contractor with a less skilled workforce, he doesn't have quite the same dollar pressure because he is not paying a pension and he is not paying the wage rate. So you can get by with less.